The sound of my phone buzzing at 3 a.m. was like an alarm bell ringing through my foggy mind. My eyelids felt like lead, and the sterile smell of the hospital room hung heavy in the air. I tried to ignore it, telling myself it was probably another insurance claim or a hospital notification, but then the message popped up on the screen, and my heart sank. "Hey, just wanted to let you know, I've moved in. It's so nice here. Thank you again for the place. See you soon, smiley face." It was from my sister. My mind spun as I tried to process the words, but nothing seemed to make sense. What did she mean, moved in? This wasn't a vacation home. This was my luxury apartment, the one I'd spent years saving for, the one I'd barely moved into before getting hospitalized for surgery. There was no way I'd given her permission to stay there. I hadn't even asked her to help with anything, especially not with my space. Confusion quickly turned to anger. The reality of what was happening hit me like a freight train, and I couldn't wrap my mind around how selfish and careless she'd been. But it wasn't until the developer stepped in that I realized just how far things were going to escalate. Sitting in that sterile hospital room, hooked up to machines that beeped incessantly, I had to take a deep breath. Was I going crazy? Was my sister really living in my luxury apartment without asking? This was only the beginning, I knew. My sister had always been impulsive, but this was something else entirely. Something that would change everything I knew about family, property, and trust. I just wasn't prepared for the storm that was about to hit. The morning after I received that message, I was still reeling. The pain from my surgery was starting to subside, but the emotional upheaval felt worse than anything I could have imagined. My sister, Amelia, and I had always been close, or at least I thought we were. She'd always been the free spirit, the one who followed her whims without much regard for the consequences, while I had worked hard for everything I had, including the apartment. I had always let her have her way. After all, we were family, right? But this was different. This crossed a line. I waited until I was discharged from the hospital to confront her. The entire drive home, my stomach churned with a mix of anger and disbelief. What would I even say? How had things gotten to this point? When I finally arrived at the apartment, I was greeted with the sound of laughter from inside. I stood there for a moment, frozen, staring at the door. The place was supposed to be my sanctuary, the one spot in the world where I could unwind after years of hustle. And yet, it was now filled with her voice, that loud, carefree laugh I used to adore but now found utterly irritating. I hesitated before ringing the doorbell. The silence that followed was a bit too long, and I could hear the shuffle of footsteps inside. Finally, the door opened. There she was, standing in the doorway, looking like she'd just stepped out of a magazine. The bright floral dress, messy hair styled just perfectly, it was as if she'd been living here for weeks, not just a day. "Hey, you're home. How was the hospital? I hope everything went well." She said it with that sweet tone she always used when she wanted to soften me up, as though the world was still in perfect harmony. I could feel my jaw clenching. "Amelia, what the hell are you doing here?" My voice came out sharper than I intended, but I couldn't hold it back. She blinked at me, seemingly taken aback. "What do you mean? You told me I could stay while you're recovering. I thought you'd want me here to take care of things." A rush of frustration bubbled up inside me. "I never said you could move in. This is my place. How could you just?" "I'm your sister," she interrupted, holding her hands up defensively. "I thought you'd appreciate me looking after the apartment while you're gone. It's not like you've been here much anyway. It's been sitting empty for months." The words hit harder than I expected. She wasn't wrong, at least not entirely. I had been caught up in work, traveling constantly, and even though I'd recently moved into the apartment, I hadn't spent as much time there as I'd hoped. But that didn't give her the right to take over, to act as though she owned the place. I had worked for this. Every penny, every sleepless night was to make this apartment my own. It wasn't supposed to be a charity for Amelia's whims. "I asked you to help out while I was in the hospital, Amelia, not to move in." "You've crossed a line," I said, feeling my hands start to shake. I knew I had to calm down before the conversation spiraled into something uglier. Amelia's face flushed, and I could see the defensiveness flicker in her eyes. But then, her tone shifted. "You don't get it, do you? You've been so caught up in your work and your apartment that you've completely forgotten about me. I thought this would be a way to reconnect, you know? I've been struggling, and this was the one place I could come and feel, I don't know, safe. You've been too busy to even think about me. All I wanted was a little help. My heart dropped. I'd never meant to make her feel abandoned, but somewhere along the way I had. Amelia had always been the baby of the family, the one who was often overlooked because I was the responsible one, the one who took care of everything. But hearing her say that she needed help struck me like a cold slap. I stood there, unsure of what to say next. She wasn't wrong to feel neglected. I had been focused on my career, and I had been so determined to carve out my own space that I had forgotten the needs of those closest to me. But this, her taking my apartment without asking, this wasn't how it should have been handled. I didn't forget about you, I said softly, swallowing the lump in my throat. I didn't think you'd do this. I didn't think you'd take over everything. I never asked you to come here, Amelia. She looked down, her shoulders slumping slightly. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to make things worse. I just thought. I don't know, I thought I was doing the right thing. There was a long silence between us. I could see that she genuinely regretted it, but the damage had been done. The apartment I'd worked so hard for felt like it wasn't mine anymore. I had come home to find my safe space violated, and that wasn't something I could simply let go of. The tension in the air was palpable, and that's when the doorbell rang again. This time, it wasn't a casual visitor. I recognized the sharp voice before I even saw him. The developer. I had known Greg for years. He was the one who sold me the apartment, and we had a great professional relationship. But seeing him here, standing at the door with an expression I couldn't quite read, told me that this wasn't just a friendly visit. Something was wrong. Amelia opened the door, and Greg's eyes immediately went to me. There was an awkward pause before he spoke. I'm sorry to intrude, but I need to have a word with both of you. I looked at Amelia and then back at Greg. My mind raced. Was he here because of the way my sister had moved in? Did he know what had happened? His presence could only mean one thing. This was about to get even more complicated. The tension in the room was palpable as Greg stepped inside the apartment, his presence far more commanding than I'd ever expected. The developer wasn't just some businessman who sold luxury apartments. He was the mastermind behind the entire building's design, the person who knew every inch of the property and was deeply invested in its success. I never imagined I'd see him standing in my apartment, but here he was, looking more serious than I'd ever seen him before. Amelia stood by the door, her face a mix of curiosity and nervousness. Greg, is everything okay? Her voice had lost the usual bubbly quality, replaced by an undertone of unease. Greg gave her a curt nod before turning his attention to me. His gaze lingered for a moment longer than usual, almost as if he was assessing me, before he spoke. I'm afraid there's a situation I need to address. I've received a complaint about unauthorized occupants in the building. My stomach dropped. I knew exactly where this was headed. Unauthorized occupants? I repeated, my voice catching in my throat. Greg, I never gave anyone permission to stay here. He nodded. I'm aware. That's why I came by. His eyes flickered briefly to Amelia, who had the decency to look guilty. We've had multiple reports about tenants noticing strange activity in the building. There's been a significant increase in complaints regarding noise, access to restricted areas, and disturbances that go against the building's policy. I felt a wave of panic rise within me. This wasn't just about my sister staying in my apartment. It was about the apartment building itself. Greg didn't just represent the development. He represented a brand, an image of luxury and exclusivity. A scandal involving unauthorized occupants would reflect poorly on everyone involved, especially him. Amelia stepped forward, her voice slightly defensive. Wait, so you're saying that I can't stay here? I thought this was family property. I wasn't causing any trouble. I was just staying here while my sister was in the hospital. Greg gave her a measured look. The building's rules are very clear, and this isn't about family. This is about a legal contract. Only the designated tenant is allowed to reside in the unit, and it's important to respect the policies in place. I understand you are trying to help, but this isn't the right way to go about it. A wave of frustration surged through me. How could she not understand the gravity of the situation? This wasn't just a matter of feeling guilty for being in the hospital and wanting to help me out. This was a breach of protocol, and worse, it was making things infinitely more complicated than they needed to be. I looked at Greg, trying to steady my nerves. So, what happens now? Do we need to have her leave? Greg's gaze softened ever so slightly, but it was still firm. It's not just that. We've also had complaints about how the apartment has been maintained. I'm not implying that anyone's done anything intentionally wrong, but I've been asked to step in to resolve this before it escalates further. I froze. Complaints about the apartment? He nodded. The luxury units are designed to be pristine, and they're regularly inspected. There were concerns about unauthorized alterations, mess, and issues with the building's security system. It's all very delicate, and we need to address it properly. My mind raced as I processed what he was saying. Alterations? Mess? There was no way Amelia had done anything like that. She didn't even know how to fix a leaky faucet, let alone tamper with the apartment's systems. But the fact that Greg was here, addressing this with such a serious demeanor, meant that someone had raised red flags, and those red flags were now attached to my name. I turned to Amelia, my voice barely above a whisper. "What did you do?" I asked, my frustration bubbling over. "Did you change something in the apartment? Did you break anything?" Amelia's face paled, and I could see her struggling to come up with a response. "I didn't break anything. I promise." She swallowed hard. "I just, rearranged a few things to make it more comfortable. I thought it would be nice to make it feel more lived in." Rearranged? That didn't sound like much. But then again, I knew Amelia's idea of rearranging was more of a whirlwind than anything organized. The thought of her moving furniture around in my pristine apartment made my blood run cold. I ran my hand through my hair, trying to make sense of the chaos. This wasn't just about her staying here without permission anymore. Now, I was staring down the possibility of the apartment being compromised, the value of my investment being threatened by something as simple as the way the furniture was placed. And who knew what else Amelia had done? Greg cleared his throat, pulling me back to the present. "Look, this doesn't have to get worse. I'm here to help, but you both need to understand that there are rules to follow. This situation needs to be rectified before things go any further. I'll have the security team come by tomorrow to do a full inspection, and we'll need to address any violations found." I nodded, but my thoughts were clouded with anxiety. An inspection? By the security team? What kind of violations were we looking at? Could this be the end of my dream apartment? Was it really worth it to keep my relationship with Amelia intact if it meant risking my financial future? "Greg, please," I said, my voice shaky. This wasn't supposed to happen. I didn't ask her to move in, and I didn't give her permission to make changes. I don't know how to fix this." Greg's expression softened, but he remained professional. "I know this is tough, but I'll help you. We'll make it right, but you'll need to take responsibility for your actions as well." I took a deep breath, my mind racing. I could feel the weight of the situation bearing down on me. I had worked so hard to get here, to achieve this level of success and independence, and now it was all teetering on the edge of collapse because of a few bad decisions. "I'll handle it," I said, my voice firmer now. "I'll talk to Amelia and we'll make sure everything is cleared up. No more mistakes." Greg gave me a nod of approval. "I trust you'll get this sorted. Just remember, these things can spiral quickly if they're not addressed. Keep your eyes open and stay on top of things." As Greg left the apartment, his warning echoed in my mind. The storm was far from over, and I wasn't sure if I had the strength to weather it. The cracks in my life, my relationships, and my dreams were starting to show, and the worst part was that I didn't know if I could fix them. All I could do now was try. The next few days felt like a blur, one endless cycle of sleepless nights, tense conversations, and endless worry. Greg had warned me that this could spiral out of control, and he wasn't wrong. The building's management had sent over their security team for the inspection, and what they found was far worse than I could have imagined. The apartment, which I had worked so hard to maintain and build a life around, had been subjected to an unofficial transformation. Amelia had moved in as if she were redecorating a dollhouse, turning the place into something unrecognizable. They found alterations in the system, nothing major, but the kind of things that could cause issues down the road. The security system had been disabled temporarily, the furniture rearranged to an almost bizarre extent, and there were even a few small marks on the floor and walls that couldn't be easily repaired. The developer had made it clear that it wasn't just a personal inconvenience, it was a liability. Everything felt like it was crumbling in front of me. I was stuck between trying to salvage my relationship with Amelia, who was stubbornly apologetic but still didn't truly understand the consequences of her actions, and trying to salvage my apartment, my investment, my life. And then, the final straw came. I was at the apartment alone, staring at the mess that had been left behind. The walls that used to be pristine now had subtle indentations, like the marks of overzealous furniture rearranging. The floor, once a polished work of art, was now scuffed and worn. I ran my fingers across the marble countertop, the cool surface almost mocking me. The apartment was never meant to be a home. It was a symbol of something I had achieved, a milestone that felt like it was being ripped away. The doorbell rang and I froze. My heart thudded in my chest as I opened it, only to find Amelia standing there, her eyes red-rimmed, her posture defeated. She had been avoiding me for days, and I had tried to do the same, too, trying to avoid confronting the mess she had created. But here she was, standing on the other side of the door, looking like she had just walked through hell. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't mean to ruin everything. I was trying to make things better, trying to help. I didn't understand how much this place meant to you, and now I see how wrong I was." I could see the regret in her eyes, and for a moment, I felt a wave of sympathy. But then the anger, the betrayal, the anxiety I had been holding in for days came rushing to the surface. I had to do something. I had to take control before everything spiraled beyond repair. "Amelia," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "you don't get it. This isn't just about rearranging some furniture. This is my life, my investment. You moved in without asking. You broke things. You violated my trust. And now, I'm facing consequences that I never should have had to deal with. I worked my ass off for this apartment. You didn't." Her face contorted, a mixture of guilt and frustration. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I thought I was doing something nice. You were in the hospital, and I thought you needed help. But I see now how selfish I was. I didn't think it through." The words were hollow. I wanted to scream at her, to tell her how much she had hurt me, how much she had ruined everything I had worked for. But I couldn't. There was no way to make her understand the depth of what she'd done. The damage was done. "I know you didn't mean to, but that's not the point," I said, my voice rising. "You took it upon yourself to make decisions about my life. This isn't a game. I didn't ask for your help. I asked for space. You overstepped, and now I'm paying the price." Her eyes filled with tears, and she reached out as if to grab my arm, but I pulled back, my body tense with anger and frustration. I needed her to understand that this wasn't just about the apartment anymore. It was about trust. It was about boundaries. It was about family and how fragile the connections we shared really were. "I never asked you to make my decisions for me," I said, my voice cracking. "I never asked you to live here. I don't know how to fix this. How to make things right again. How to repair this apartment, and how to repair us." There was silence for a moment, thick and heavy. I could see that Amelia was genuinely broken, but the reality of the situation was clear. There were no easy fixes. There was no magic word or gesture that could undo the damage she'd done. She had violated my space, my trust, and even worse, the consequences of her actions now threatened everything I had worked so hard to achieve. "I'm sorry," she whispered again, and this time, I could tell she meant it. "But I don't know how to make this better. I don't think I can." I wanted to hold on to the anger, to push her away, but I couldn't. Part of me understood that this wasn't just her fault. It was a mixture of her impulsiveness, my own neglect, and the blurred lines of family dynamics that had led us to this point. It wasn't just her. It was both of us. I let out a shaky breath, the anger beginning to fade into something else, something more heartbreaking. I know you didn't mean to hurt me, but I can't keep pretending like everything's fine when it's not. We need some time apart to figure this out. She nodded slowly, tears streaming down her face. I understand. As I closed the door behind her, I felt the weight of the moment. I had no idea how I was going to fix the apartment, how I was going to fix the relationship with my sister, or how I was going to repair the cracks that had formed in my life. But one thing was certain, I couldn't keep running from it. I couldn't keep pretending that everything would just magically get better. The time for change was now, whether I was ready or not. And as I sat there in the silence, staring at the mess that was once my dream apartment, I knew that I had reached the point of no return. Everything was on the line. The only question was, what was I willing to do to fix it? The days that followed were an emotional blur, each one dragging on as I tried to process everything that had happened. Amelia hadn't been in touch since that day I asked for space, and for the first time in a long time, I found myself truly alone. The apartment that had once felt like a symbol of my success now felt cold, distant, like a place where I no longer belonged. But as the silence stretched on, something inside me started to shift. I couldn't keep running from this. It wasn't just the apartment that had been damaged, it was my relationship with my sister, my family, and perhaps even myself. I had to do something to fix it. But how? I spent the next few days putting things back together. I hired a professional to repair the damage in the apartment, fixing the scuff marks, replacing the broken fixtures, and reprogramming the security system. It felt like a bandage on a wound that had been torn open, but it was a start. Slowly, the apartment began to feel like mine again. The pristine surfaces returned, and I started to find comfort in the familiar. But fixing the apartment wasn't enough. I needed to fix the rift between Amelia and me. I couldn't let this be the thing that drove us apart forever. So, one evening, when I couldn't stand the weight of the unspoken tension anymore, I picked up my phone and called her. It rang 3 times before she picked up. I could hear the hesitation in her voice. "Hello?" "Amelia," I said, trying to sound as calm as possible. "Can we talk?" There was a long pause, and then she sighed. "I don't know if there's anything left to say." I clenched my fist, taking a deep breath. There's a lot to say. I can't keep pretending everything's fine when it's not. I need to understand why you did what you did. I need you to see why this has been so hard for me. "I know," she said quietly. I didn't think it through. I just thought I was helping, that I could do something for you, but I was selfish. I didn't even stop to consider what you needed. I was so focused on myself, on what I thought would make me feel better, that I didn't care about what it would do to you." Her words stung, but at the same time, I could hear the sincerity in them. She wasn't justifying her actions anymore. She was acknowledging the hurt she had caused, and that was the first step. "I know you didn't mean to hurt me," I said, my voice softening. "But it felt like you didn't care about what I'd worked for. I worked so hard to build my life here, and it all felt like it was slipping away because of something I couldn't control. I just didn't know how to handle it." "I get it now," she whispered. "I've been thinking about it, and I realize I messed up. You were already dealing with so much, and I thought I could make it better, but instead, I made it worse." I leaned back in my chair, letting her words sink in. It wasn't easy to admit, but I could see that she truly understood the weight of what had happened. It wasn't about the apartment anymore, it was about us and how we had both failed to communicate. "Amelia," I said, my voice more steady now. "I don't want this to be the thing that breaks us. I don't want to lose you over something like this." There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and then she replied, her voice trembling. "I don't want to lose you either." I smiled softly, even though I could hear the tears in her voice. "Then let's fix this. Together. But we need to be honest with each other from now on. No more secrets, no more assumptions. We need to communicate, Amelia. Because if we don't, we'll lose everything." "I promise," she said, and I could hear the sincerity in her voice. "I'll do better. I'll respect your space, and I won't do anything without asking first. I swear." We sat in silence for a few moments, and then I finally spoke again, my heart lighter than it had been in days. "Good. Because that's all I need, your respect and honesty. We can work through this. We just need to make sure we're both on the same page. After hanging up, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The path forward wouldn't be easy, but I knew that this was a start. Amelia and I had to rebuild, but we had the tools now, understanding, communication, and a willingness to be vulnerable. We could make it work. The next day, I invited her over to the apartment, hoping to begin the slow process of restoring our relationship. She arrived with a small plant in her hands, an offering of sorts, her way of saying sorry, I suppose. I took it with a smile, and we began talking, starting with the small things, building our way up to the bigger issues. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. In the weeks that followed, Amelia came by more often, this time with a sense of purpose. She respected my space, checked in before coming over, and slowly, things started to feel right again. The apartment was mine again, and with it, I began to find a sense of peace that had been missing for so long. But most importantly, I started to see my sister in a new light. She wasn't the impulsive, thoughtless person I had made her out to be. She was someone who had made a mistake, but was willing to learn from it, to grow. And maybe, just maybe, that was the most important lesson of all. The apartment could be fixed. But the bond between us? That was something worth fighting for. And so, in the end, that's what I did. I fought for my family. As I sat in my apartment, looking out at the city below, I finally felt like I could breathe again. The past few months had been a whirlwind of emotions: anger, frustration, guilt, and regret. But now, as the dust settled, I realized something important. The apartment was just a building. It was the place I had worked so hard for, but it was never the thing that truly mattered. What mattered was the relationships I had, the people who stood by me when I needed them most. And through all the chaos, through all the mistakes and missteps, I'd learned something I hadn't realized I needed to: that family wasn't about perfection. It was about growth, forgiveness, and the willingness to make things right. Amelia and I had both learned lessons the hard way. She had understood that boundaries needed to be respected, that I needed my space, and that her impulsiveness wasn't just a harmless quirk, it could have consequences. But more importantly, I had learned to let go. I had to accept that mistakes would happen, that no one was perfect, and that I couldn't control everything, no matter how much I tried. Things weren't perfect between us, but they didn't need to be. We were rebuilding, piece by piece, learning to trust each other again. I had my apartment back, yes, but I also had something more precious: the possibility of healing and moving forward, of reconnecting with my sister in a way I hadn't thought possible. And as I sat in that living room, with Amelia by my side, I realized that the apartment, the investment I had worked so hard for, was just the beginning. The real treasure lay in the people I shared it with, and with them, I could rebuild anything. I leaned back, feeling a sense of peace wash over me. The future was uncertain, yes, but I was no longer afraid. Whatever came next, I knew one thing for sure: we would face it together. And that was enough. And just like that, everything began to feel like it was falling into place again.